I really wish I could add subtitles to that video because I was saying things correctly until halfway through, and then I started realizing that I made quite a few errors. I need to, when I start talking too much, I think the numbers just start disappearing. But yes, the mortgage, to pay off the mortgage of £300,000, that's £15,000 a year, so that's 1,250. I said 1,500, no, it was 1,250. I think I just missed off the two and saw the five and then said 1,500. No, it's 1,250. And then if you wanted to pay off £12,000 a year to help pay off this huge £150 mortgage plus the 100,000 on or if you, I don't know, 300,000 is the mortgage of the two divided by two. Yeah, so that works out to be 150 on both. But I think really it'd be 200,000 on one property and 100,000 on the other, or something like that. But yes, she would need to make 15,000 a year to pay off the interest, and she would need to make £12,000 a year to pay off to help pay towards the mortgage. But this is a 35-year mortgage basically, so if she pays off £12,000 each year for the next 35 years, she will just about cover it. And okay, I think people are actually assuming that the house market is going to increase, so she's thinking, wow, the house market has doubled in the last few years, it's doubled in the last 10 years, and if it doubles again, then this mortgage will easily be paid off. I think a lot of people are thinking like this, but I think they're not actually realizing that a lot of people's salary has not been doubling, hence people have actually just been getting poorer. When my parents were buying a property for £25,000, a small flat in Hampstead, they bought it. I think it actually was 45,000, and I think that my granddad gave him 20,000, so he actually helped pay him off. But he gave him £20,000, and the salary back then was okay, not as high as it is now, but it was not that much lower, like not hugely lower compared to what salaries are now. So salaries have been going up a little bit, but mortgages and mortgage rates and the amount of money that people are borrowing has just been getting higher and higher. And I guess the bankers have just been they've been getting wealthier and wealthier. Why? Because they make 5% on all these mortgages, and this is money that they just get to use to help put into the whole banking system, so that the banking system becomes very, very wealthy, and the people want to borrow this money and are happy to take more and more risks on the belief that the house market is still going to double. If she was to buy these houses, and it turned out that they did all double, then this 375 house, this 275 two-bedroom flat, and this £220,000 flat, and also the house in Birmingham, if the house market was to double in the next 10 years, then she'd be a really, really rich person, and that's what she's thinking. So I think she's seeing it from she doesn't believe. I told her a house market crash is around the corner, and she does not believe me. Now I might be wrong. I know that I believe that the Illuminati was going to help me. I believe that the world was going to help me and expose me as being Christ, and I was wrong. That's what she's thinking. She doesn't believe, my sister does not believe anything that I'm saying, because she knows that I've been saying that I'm Christ for a very long time, and she also knows that all the things I was saying, that I was going to be that people were going to say that I'm Christ, and the world was going to change because I'm not Jesus, and people who have been promoting Jesus and God the Father all their life, these are people who are going to actually just be seen as liars for promoting things. There's that guy that goes on about how awful Islam is. I absolutely hate him because he's 100% certain that Jesus is the only way. All these Christian preachers are 100% certain that Jesus is the only way you can be saved, when in reality Jesus isn't real. So everything they're saying in regards to Jesus is just complete false. It's just lies, falsehood, and not true. And yes, he's insulting Islam as if it's terrible. And okay, I do kind of agree, because I do not agree with the belittlement of women and the sexism that lies in it, and the misogyny, and a lot of the views, and thinking that dogs are dirty animals. No, dogs are cute. I mean, okay, the dog that looks like a mop is kind of a bit dirty, but most of them are very, very cute. But even the dog that looks like a mop is still very cute looking like a mop. But anyway, yeah, I don't agree with their views, and there's going to be a massive change when people realize how many lies there are in the Bible, and people are going to see things very differently. Right now there is this sort of evil here, God here. God and the devil are two different things, and anything evil comes from the devil, and anything. I mean, this is a very stupid mindset, and it encourages stupidity, and these people who have this sort of mindset are seeing things incorrectly. That you must protect Israel, look after Israel, love Israel, and to them Israel is what? People who worship the Torah and believe a bunch of things that I don't believe in. None of that seems to make any sense to me, and they might start seeing things very differently when they realize that Israel is actually just a code name for the real Christ, a real Christ who's not Jesus. But I've been telling my sister about this collapse that's going to be happening, and she was right. Nothing did happen, and therefore she doesn't have any respect for my views, and therefore she is happy to take out this mortgage on the belief that in another 20 years time all these properties are going to be worth double, but the mortgage that she has on it is going to be worth far less. And I think people that have no discernment over what's about to happen, because house prices should not be this much. People shouldn't be earning £3,000 a year only to find that their mortgage is $250 a year. Everyone should be able to afford a home, and if you're spending huge amounts on income, I understand that if there's two people living in there, you've got two incomes, the husband and the wife usually are both on income. But if you start having kids, you'll find that one of them can't work because you have to look after kids. If they're under schooling age, they can't go to work. And even if they're not under schooling age, nurseries and stuff are very expensive, and a lot of people don't realize that people's circumstances do massively change. You might find yourself in a job that you love or like and enjoy, and then you might find that a new colleague comes in and you don't like them, and you end up having an argument, and it just makes you want to quit. And if you quit, you can't pay the mortgage. And Sophie doesn't seem to realize the risks that she is taking by having it. She's just thinking that the house market is going to double in the next 10 years, and therefore even if she does sell the property, she'll easily pay off the mortgage and stuff. And let's turn this light back on. And yeah, I've tried to warn her that the house market is around the corner, but I also tried to tell her that I was going to be promoted as Christ soon, and she clearly that hasn't happened. I think her partner is not the smartest, but at the same time he would see the need to have a bigger house because of having a girl and a boy, and him wanting to put the child's needs first, and therefore I think if bankers do find themselves in a position where someone has become on debt, maybe they've got a house in Madeira and they took out a mortgage and they've been trying to pay the mortgage back, and they have been paying the mortgage back for ages, and then they find that they have a kid, they can't work because the mother can't work or can't look after the child, so they have to look after the child, hence they can't work, hence they can't pay off the mortgage. And if the people in there you can't get them out because there's laws that make it impossible to get them out because they've got young children, or the government isn't helping them get them out. There's some people that end up falling into debt because of real, them wanting to do what's best for their kids, and finding that they can't because of change of circumstances, or people not paying the mortgage, and they didn't think this situation would happen, or them feeling guilty. If you have a person like the person that's staying in our house, 950 is not a huge amount to pay off. If there's two of them, then that should be easy to pay off 950. But if there's a single mum with two children under the age of 5, it's hard to pay that kind of money off. And if they're only paying a little bit, it's not much. But if Sophie's taking on a massive mortgage, she needs to get a massive amount of rent, and she can't guarantee that the people in there can pay the rent. That's another thing I made in the last video. I said the people that were paying the mortgage, they weren't paying the mortgage, they're paying the rent. I accidentally used the wrong word. So the people, the people that rent the house, they pay the rent, and this pays the mortgage. But if you are only able to pay the mortgage because of people paying the rent, and then you find that the people paying rent don't want to pay the rent, or if the market crashes and you find that the rent isn't as high because it shouldn't be as high, I think if the rents weren't as high, then people would have more money to spend. Now, if they have more money to spend, I noticed there's a Universal Studios park that's about to open up in Bradford, and that looked amazing. That really does. And right now I'm just thinking, is it really worth it? Because if people are broke, and if they're spending all their salaries on just paying off these overly high rents, are they actually going to be able to afford to go to a Universal Studios in England? I'd love there to be a Universal Studios in England, but if people are so poor that almost all their salary is going on rent, then and they can't buy because of all these other greedy people that are just buying up loads of houses for the sake of having taking out high mortgages on the belief that the house is going to be worth double in 10 years time. They can't get onto the market because they don't want to take the risk, so they're being smart, but because they're being smart, they end up having to pay the rent, and these rents are incredibly high, and they can't afford to go to places like Disneyland's pretty expensive in America. But yeah, but if things were to change, and if people weren't spending all their salary on rent, if house markets was far lower, people would have more money to actually spend on luxuries and to spend on nice days out. I think in the future I'd love to have a world where people can spend a third of their salary on just days out and enjoyment and pleasure, and if the money can get spent on nice salons, nice spas, visiting places, I think that would be a much better world where people spend their salary on enjoyment and on leisure. And okay, they might not need to work 5 days a week, but if that's better, if they work 2 days a week and you have more people that are earning less money but at the same time earning enough money to be able to live off and to be able to afford these days out, rather than having to spend all their money on, right now there's a divide. There's people who are spending all their money on rent, and they're because they don't own a property, and there's people who own a property, they're not spending their money on rent, they have a huge amount of income, maybe they have a second or third house that they just happen to buy, or maybe they inherited it from a relative. I'm really, really poor, but because my parents own a £1 million flat in Hampstead, if they were to die and I was to rent it out, we could probably get about 3,000 a month or something, and suddenly my £450 a month will go up to 450 plus the 150, because I'm sure my sister would want half. I'd go from being very, very poor to being very, very rich if only my parents die. But I don't feel like I would have earned it or gained it, and therefore I just, a world where smart people, you have your salary and then you have a huge amount to spend on it, and you don't have to spend all your money on rent because of this greed but at the same time, maybe I should trust the bankers more than I trust the average person. If the bankers are planning on having this sort of house market collapse where the houses drop half in value, and then they just sort of repossess all the homes that have done this, and then they become incredibly wealthy. Okay, they won't be able to sell the houses for as high as it used to be able to, but the people who have spent the last 10 years earning all their salary or earning lots and lots of money to try and pay to buy these houses with these big mortgages, that they're going to find that all the money that they invested into it is going to be lost. But maybe they shouldn't have maybe they should have realized that house prices are way too high and there's a sort of false market. I mean, that's what I think. I think it would have been a good time to buy. I've heard someone actually say this. It's one of a client, but I haven't seen clients for a long time, so I think it was a client that I saw 2 years ago. But yeah, he said that it was a good time to buy. 10 years ago was a very good time to buy, because obviously the house market has gone up, and if you bought a house 10 years ago, if I would have bought a house in 2008 when I left uni, which is when I was trying to get my dad to buy me a house, I would be having a nice fairly big house in London right now. But because he refused to help me, and I had to try and get work, and then I spent 3 years on the dole only to find that I couldn't get work, and was very depressed over it, and then had to do massage only to find that this world was just full of idiots. And then my hatred toward that people came, and then I kind of just saw the need to go to Birmingham just because I needed to not pay rent. If I had have bought a long time ago, I would be sitting on a house that's worth a lot of money, and it's annoying because that would have been so much better, and my whole life would have been so much better, and I wouldn't feel like I've been. Birmingham's it's a very Muslim area, and if you're someone who doesn't really like seeing people covered up, women covered up, it's not really the best. But I'm always in the house, and there's a lot of schools actually in the area, and if you walk around just at the time it's closing, just everyone you see is wearing. The number of people who live in my area that's Islamic is not very high, but the number of kids that go to the 3 or 4 primary schools in this area, the majority of their parents are all Islamic, and I don't like seeing it. And therefore, if someone was to say that England is Birmingham is being taken over by Muslims, yeah, if you walk around my area at 4 o'clock when the schools close, or is it 3:30, the whole area is just full of Muslim people. And anyway,